Food triggers being specific foods. These are not actually as cut and dry as we once thought. So I've recently talked some about nutrition in the management of migraines and how this can be a little bit more challenging to find a specific culprit than a lot of people initially realize with migraines, because the triggers that we often think of as being, food triggers, being specific foods, these are not actually as cut and dry as we once thought. We're starting to see more and more literature coming out about the fact that, many people's food triggers might actually be early signs of the migraine starting and actually be cravings. So, for example, if somebody finds bananas trigger their migraines, it may in fact be that you're craving bananas early in the prodromal stages of the migraine process, and it may not be the fact that the banana itself is triggering a migraine. That being said, there are some studies investigating the effect that, if you have true food sensitivities where, you have like maybe a subtle allergy to a food, and maybe you are slightly allergic to bananas or something like that, you can have a bit of an immune response, and that can actually trigger a migraine in some people. But we're finding that it's more often global dietary patterns that are more impactful for the migraine management process. So that would be things like, eating a caloric neutral diet or a slightly caloric deficit diet would help. Whereas being in a caloric surplus can actually trigger migraines and be slightly provocative for migraines. And when we start to recognize that these big patterns, like having a lot of ultra processed foods in your diet, can be triggering for migraines, and having a bit of extra body fat, which can be metabolically active, and subtle caloric restriction, doesn't have to be a lot, just a few hundred calories, subtle weight loss, just 5 to 10% of your body weight, can be huge in management of migraines, and maybe more impactful than trying to find out every little food trigger you might have. But the challenge there can be, how do you know how much you're eating, and how do you know if your diet is affecting you or not? So if you do believe that a certain food is triggering your migraines, it can be helpful to try to eliminate that for a period of time. So if you give it a 2 to 4 week window to kind of assess, that should give you some insight into whether or not that has an effect. You should also see, if you do eat that food, you should see a triggering of that migraine in about 12 to 24 hours. It shouldn't take long for that to be happening. So if you ate a banana and that was what you thought it was a trigger, that is something that you should see trigger you fairly quickly if that truly is a trigger. Then, I think incorporating a bit more like meticulous documenting of these things, like really being mindful of things like, you were like writing down exactly what you ate, writing down what you felt around a migraine, doing actual calorie tracking, using something like MyFitnessPal, which has free basic macro tracking and can be a nice tool to help with this process. But dialing in on your basal metabolic rate, and then calculating how much exercise you might be expending, how many calories you might be expending, and then also just how much food you're actually eating. Recognizing that a lot of foods have more calories and more things in them that might be triggering to some, like added food substances like nitrites and other things like tons of sodium, which might be in more of the ultra processed foods. Those things can be triggering to some. Just starting to get a real feel for what your food intake actually looks like can help so much with starting to make little changes that actually move the needle as far as your diet goes. For example, incorporating things like higher fiber, higher protein foods that you may not have initially realized were lower calorie than some of your preferred foods initially can make you feel full while you're starting to maybe cut back on a few calories. It can also help to enhance your adherence to dietary changes, because these things are often going to feel very satisfying to eat. Things that are protein rich and fiber rich tend to be keep you full, keep you from feeling deprived. And you can eat a lot of bulky foods to help, make sure that you're not feeling that deficit quite as strongly. So those things can help a lot. And, obviously this is a very individualized process for everyone. And so, recognizing that one size does not really fit all. And, you don't have to do calorie tracking to make these changes, but I think having a baseline of understanding can help. So doing like a week of calorie tracking and macro tracking can actually be profoundly impactful on your health. So, because you can start to just make little changes once you start to realize how many calories, how much protein, how much salt, how much sugar you're eating. Those things can definitely play a non-trivial role in this migraine process.